I think we can probably start. So let me share my screen again. And okay, just one moment. Sorry, I just want to pull the chat up. Okay, a few people in Worcester going to be joining us in Worcester. I'm going to be in Worcester Centre, so if you're there, I hope to see you there. Anyway, just to let you know, if you've registered for this, you will receive a certificate of participation and a webinar handout in the next few days. So I can't send you the slides, but I can send you the handout, which has all the information and a lot more. Okay. You will also receive a certificate of participation, which if you're an Italian teacher, it counts as accredited training. If you're in another country, I hope it can help you. Okay, but please let me know that email address, formazione@mlaworld.com, and if you don't receive it, I can get those out to you. Okay, just to let you know, the certificate counts as 4 hours of training. This webinar is not going to be 4 hours long, but it includes, we've given you a lot of extra reading links and even a lesson that you can see the lesson and the plans in there. So I think it's going to be certainly helpful. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to hand this over to Kathy for most of it. I'll be coming in every now and then, but Kathy's planned this out, so I'll let her speak about task-based learning. Okay, and there you go, Kathy.
Great, thank you. So we'll start with an introduction about what task-based language, a task-based lesson is. So the approach to teaching EFL has undergone a remarkable evolution over the years, driven in large part by a deepening understanding of language acquisition. We all acquired a language naturally, and the classroom is really trying to mimic that more than, and move away from this instruction. From the early grammar translation method to communicative approaches, task-based learning and beyond, the evolution of EFL teaching method reflects a continuous quest for more effective and learner-centered approaches. So we'll go into this in a little bit more detail, but the learner-centered approach is really about giving them more responsibility over their own learning. As EFL educators have embraced new perspectives and insights, the evolution of teaching methods has transformed language classrooms into dynamic, interactive, and communicative learning environments that empower students to develop the language skills and cultural competence needed in today's globalized world. The world is changing so fast, and you know, it's important that the classroom does too.
Yeah, and I think the needs of students has changed over the years. You know, whatever they're using English for, you know, it needs to be up to date tasks that they're doing. You know, that they're going to be working in the English context. Maybe it's designing apps. Maybe it's talking to people about business in different parts of the world. You know, it isn't what maybe guidebooks gave you about, you know, ordering a cup of tea, you know, in a Chinese restaurant or something like that. Okay. As always, we have some objectives. Okay, so I hope the participants will be better able to
shift from a teacher-centered approach to a student-centered one in the classroom, aid students in building on their communicative competencies, and guide students to notice and repair their own language. And again, this goes back to kind of making the classroom student-centered and making our students more autonomous.
Remember that we're not talking about task-based learning as the only method. It's a complementary method, you know, and obviously there's a time for some more student-centered parts of the lesson, okay, and, you know, other approaches, but, you know, this is certainly a method that is should be part of your repertoire, I'm sure.
So what are the origins of task-based learning? It all started with the Bangalore project back in 1987 with Prabhu. And what he realized was that his students learn even more when they weren't focusing on linguistic tasks, but non-linguistic tasks. And this came from this idea that his students had more declarative knowledge than they did procedural knowledge. And so I'm sure we've all been there. You know, I remember very clearly planning a lesson on the present perfect for duration, and it was very detailed, and we went through all the different steps, and you know, they'd practiced the form, and they were doing a controlled practice of kind of like, how long have you questions? But then a student comes and asks and says to me, you know, I need to go drink some water because I have a headache from 2 hours. And then you just think, okay, there's something that's not working if you know, they're not able to use that form. And so students are great at filling out gap fill exercises and grammar structures, but rarely use them in spontaneous production. So this really led to a kind of rejection of the PPP model in grammar translation, just because.
What's the PPP model?
So it stands for present, practice, and something else.
There's a question for the chat, so look at the chat and let us know.
Production. Thank you. Yes, production.
I'll look at all our teachers answering.
Excellent.
Okay.
And yeah, and you know, it's grammar focus, and each unit of a course is going to focus on a different grammar structure, and the idea is that, you know, they produce and practice, produce, yes. But you know, we slowly realized that didn't really work. And in came all of these communicative approaches, and task-based learning wasn't the first, you know. It succeeded other communicative approaches, of which we have things like the communicative language learning and the situational approach.
We have talked about the situational approach, I think, in grammar teaching, so in one of our webinars. So yeah, if you do want to check out some of these other approaches, remember, you know, what we're always trying to look at in these webinars is different approaches, new arrows that you can, what do they say? New arrows that you can use, strings to your bow. So it might be that one that I'm thinking of. So, you know, you can always use these different ones, or go through our other webinars on our YouTube page and you'll see them.
Great, yeah. So the communicative language learning at its most extreme was very much like a kind of group therapy, and the students were encouraged to express themselves in any way they want in their mother tongue, and that would then be translated, recorded, and played back to them. So yeah, as a communicative approach, it was definitely very, very meaningful. And student-centered, because all the input, well, all the language really came from them. Generally, all of these communicative approaches favor a growing belief that when students have a need to communicate, the language will teach itself, and that is where the educator comes in, because it is our job to provide that need to communicate.
And I think very much if you've been following our other webinars, you will see that we generally talk about this sort of approach, that even if we're not doing a webinar like today on task-based learning, generally the activities we look at that we give you in the handouts and the worksheets that we provide as well are generally these sort of task-based things that get the students to do something. You know, I mean, you know, I'm sure you've got textbooks that the students have and do their homework from that have exercises and grammar explanations. So you're not needing those. You know, it's the activities that really push them to use what they've been studying that will really, you know, push them to use the language in context.
Yeah, definitely. Shun and Sylvia both made a very interesting point about grammar translation being useful in the classroom. You know, I definitely agree. I think making comparisons between grammar is useful and has its place, and it can also be really rewarding for students to have that translation down there. And as Josh said before, I think all of these, knowing about all these different approaches and different methods and applying it at the right time is what it's about.
Okay, we have some buzzwords that might be associated with task-based learning. If you want to suggest some, okay, let us know. Put them in the chat. Okay. Do you want me to go through them, Kathy?
I mean, if anyone has any ideas, we do throw around a lot of words when we talk about task-based learning. And it would be nice to see what people think.
Yeah. So, what do you think? Okay. Obviously, we're talking about some. Don't worry about raising hands. You can write directly into the chat. Okay. Creativity, peer-to-peer learning, for sure. Yeah. Creativity, inventiveness, critical. Yeah. Great.
Critical thinking, definitely. Yeah.
Projects to work towards. Yep. Assignment based. Yeah. Task based. Assignment based. Yep. Remember, these tasks may be one lesson long, as we generally do in MLA, or they could be longer, that's something students work on through multiple lessons. Okay.
Production, definitely. Very, very focused on the product. Okay, so some of the things that we think are the most important that we focused on are things like authenticity. And so the tasks are always, or a large proportion of the time, supposed to mimic what the students will be doing outside of the classroom. So, that might be talking about the latest episode of a TV series that they watch, or Josh, you gave some great examples before as well. The list is endless.
Yeah, and I mean, even if they're not authentic in the sense, some of our task-based books in MLA have imaginative things. Create a dinner party for 6 guests from history. While it's not authentic, but it does have the idea that you're talking about invitations, you're talking about organizing menus, talking about narrating an evening and things like that. So it's an authentic, the stages of the task might be authentic, even if the overall structure may not necessarily be. Okay, but yeah, as Aisha said, it is related to real life situations. Okay.
Communicative, of course, that is, one of the main points that the students have to communicate with each other in order to succeed in doing the task. Acquisition, in a sense that we're not giving them that instruction, and they naturally acquire the language through communication. They're meaningful because they are authentic and communicative. And student-centered, and that's because the tasks are really based on the students' needs, but they're also really learning how to learn. And we'll go into this in a little bit more detail, but it's all about reflection and giving them control of the learning process. So, what is a task? A task is engaging, which makes the language in itself much more memorable. The example of the dinner party, it's really, really engaging for students, and they want to share that.
And I mean, even if it is an imaginative activity, I mean, it doesn't mean that students aren't doing imaginative activities all the time in their own language, coming up with the best football team possible, imagining an ideal world or something like that. Even though it might not be authentic in the sense of real life, it is their day-to-day life, and a bit of imagination really makes it memorable.
It's valid because the aims are relevant to the task, and the task is authentic. And so if we think about the dinner party, we're not talking about using the second conditional to talk about imaginary situation. We're talking about the invitation, the guest list. It's challenging both linguistically and cognitively, because a lot of these tasks, they require that the students apply some sort of deduction, inference, reasoning, and in that way, again, it's really, really engaging.
Sylvia in the chat has just mentioned that maybe with high level students they could ask them to plan the task itself. So yeah, I would say you give them the sort of enough information of what you require, then, you know, with a bit of eliciting, you may be able to get them to sort of plan the stages. You know, what would you need for a dinner party? What do you need to know? You know, I often do that when we're talking about, you know, vocabulary, you know, or organizing something. You know, what sort of things do you need to plan a party? You know, you need to plan the food, you need to invite the people. So things like that, I think is certainly, you know, at high level students, I'd be careful. You need a backup and you might need the stages there in case. But yeah, try. I mean, it's always great for the students to come up with as much as they can. Even the actual task itself would be great.
And there's a real high level of collaboration, which leads to a development of a range of communicative competencies. And so this is, you know, often what's I believe missing from a lot of traditional courses, in that students in having to work with each other so much, they're really working on things like turn taking, asking for clarification, giving examples, and it's all these really, really important skills and super important parts of the language that, you know, they work on through collaboration. And reflection. And so this reflection that comes into at the end of the task, and we'll talk about that later, really encourages this metacognitive awareness. And that is, again, about making them autonomous. So are they able to see what they did well and where they can improve? Are they able to understand the importance of planning? Especially, this is super important with language learners, because, you know, they really have to, it takes them longer to formulate their sentences. And so understanding that they need time to plan and how to plan is really, really important. So let's have a look at a couple of examples of some more tasks.
Feel free to add some in the chat if you have some ideas. Maybe you've done task-based learning before. Maybe you've worked with MLA before, or your students have. Let us know what sort of tasks you might have done or might like to do with students. Okay.
So we have planning a trip abroad with friends.
Again, this could be something quite easy to give out sort of stages to students. You know, if you need to plan a trip abroad with friends, what sort of things do you need to plan? You know, accommodation, money, the cities you're going to visit, the flights, even what you're going to bring, things like that. Okay. Oh, making a promotional video for MLA. Peter Hull, go ahead, please make one. Feel free. Okay.
Reading about countries and ranking them. So someone had a question about if they need a certain level of maturity to get started. I imagine this is about the students, but, you know, this one you could do with very young students, because if you give them a little bit of information about the different countries and then ask them to rank them, you know, in order of size, temperatures and summer, stuff like that.
And I mean, these sort of things show that sort of activity can be done with even quite low level students just doing comparatives, superlatives, things like that, you know, instead of just, you know, getting them to say things that they already know. You know, I don't know, Africa is bigger than Europe, something like that. You know, why don't they go and do some research?
Yeah. And any kind of organizing or ranking tasks work really, really well with those lower level students, because it still has that right kind of like cognitive level of challenge for them. Solving a problem such as a dilemma at school.
Yeah, I mean, these sort of things are, it can follow up on a grammar lesson that you've done. For example, if you've been looking at modals, things like should, could, those sort of things might be useful there, have to. Okay?
And conducting an interview. So again, these are fantastic things for our students that are just kind of finishing up school and are really starting to think about, the world of work.
Yeah.
So we're going to have a little look at what a task-based lesson looks like, and then talk about some of the MLA tasks that we've created. So there are generally kind of 3 stages to a task-based lesson. We have the pre-task stage, the task, and the post-task. So in the pre-task stage, it's very much about engaging the students, giving them any language input, like any phrases or language that you think they might need to do the task. And very often that it also involves a model. And so when we talk about a model, it's the product that we expect from the students at the end of the lesson. And so by giving them that model, they know what they need to produce. Then we have the task, and the task is split into kind of 3 stages. We have the gathering of ideas, we have the planning, and the planning is the planning on how to give their report or their production, their presentation. This whole kind of task stage, from tasking, planning, reporting, is great for the teacher, because the teacher is just monitoring, taking in what the students are able to do, thinking about the language that they're using, and what language they need in order to do that task just a little bit better. So what is the gap between their language now and what we want their language to be? So after they have presented their product or given their report, here the teacher can step in and help them to notice what that next step is and what language they need in order to be able to succeed, to be more effective in their communication, and to improve their English. And then here at this language focus stage, we then have the opportunity to go back and do the task again. And if we go back and do the task a second time, it gives students the opportunity to immediately use that language that you're telling them that they need in order to improve.
Yeah, we looked at this a little bit in some other episodes of the webinar. We did look at the idea of getting students to notice that they don't have that language, and then go back and build on that knowledge, and therefore go forwards. So this sort of it doesn't mean you need to do the lesson twice. It just means that you're constantly revising, building on what you've noticed during your monitoring, and then giving them another opportunity. Okay? And I think it's something that we really try to tell teachers who are going to be working with MLA, that the staging, that monitoring is in many ways the most important part of these task-based lessons. The pre-task is very important, and it's important to the students, obviously, to be presenting something to show their finished product. But the learning, the perfecting or practicing the language is going on in that practice stage, the task stage, and it's not going to be really a worthwhile lesson if you're not doing some error correction in it too. It's not enough just to expect them to do the task and then that's it, that's finished. Next one tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely. That's a very good point. That this language focus and helping them notice the gap that they have there between their desired language level is the real difference between them doing a task and just practicing and staying at the same level, or improving.
Just so you know, if you're trying to raise your hand, don't worry about it. Just write directly into the chat. There's a chat there on Zoom, and you can write in there. We're reading that constantly.
I'll just say one more thing with that. The repetition of the task can happen, and it can happen in the same lesson. And you know, sometimes you might worry that the students will get bored doing the same task a second time. But if you've had them in pairs, you could swap the pairs around, or you could just slightly modify the task and give it a slightly different element, and continue in that way, so that they're still doing the same task, but maybe on a slightly different topic or in a slightly different way.
And I mean, most tasks, at least the MLA ones, generally have a few different stages. So, you know, there's the ability to go on to the next stage and build on what you've learned in the first one with feedback from the teacher, or even feedback from your peers. You know, it's obviously peer correction is probably going to be just as important as correction from the teacher in these sort of things. Would you like to go on to the next page?
That's
Okay, just letting you know, Kathy has been designing our new task-based learning books. So MLA for about, I think it's 6 or 7 years now, has been using the task-based learning method. We've got our own books, which are known as Task Time. They've been completely revised this year, so all new tasks from last year. And some of our students who are going to be in the summer schools are actually have been following a online course that also Kathy has prepared the books for those as well. They're different books, so we have 5 different levels. Every lesson they do a task, although the lessons are generally or the tasks are in pairs. So generally on sort of similar topics, whether it's you know, I don't know, travel or the environment or things like this. Okay, and so she's done a great job. They're just finalizing the graphics, I believe, at the moment. Okay, some of them are already finished, and teachers who'll be working in our summer centres will be using these. They're actually ebooks. If you're a teacher with us, you will get copies of them for sure. Okay, I'm afraid if you're not going to be teaching with us, or you're not a student at one of our centres, we can't give you them, okay, because they are sort of our property. But we will be looking in a moment at one of the lessons from an older book, and I have put that in the handout. So there is a lesson for you and a activity lesson plan. Okay, so you will get copies of them if you are a teacher.
Yeah, and those copies you'll get those copies before you get into your summer schools, along with all the lesson plans as well, so you can take a look through them.
Yep. Here's an example. As I said, this is an ebook, so you can see there's an image placed on the top right. Or what that means is that the students in the MLA centres generally come in with tablets or computers, and they can upload pictures or even draw pictures and put them on there. And in these blue boxes down here, it's possible for students to write in there. Now, again, you know, I'm not saying you need to prepare something like this if you're doing a task-based lesson in one of your own lessons at wherever you teach. Okay, but this is how we do it, just to show the sort of methods that we use. Okay, and in the end, this is all there to facilitate the actual task. It's not the task itself that you're looking at. The task is what they're doing in class. I don't know. Would you agree with that, Kathy?
Yeah. Supportive, definitely. And as you can see here, the lesson is very clearly split up into 3 stages. We have the pre-task, the task, and the post-task. So the students see that as the pre-task being the look and check, and this is where we are engaging them in the task. And here we have some lovely language that, you know, we hope that they use whilst doing the task. Then we have the research and complete, which is the task stage of the lesson. So this is where they're generating their own ideas, collaborating with each other, and using that space there, the text box, in order to make some notes that's really going to help them with their presentation or the report. which is the show and tell. So the show and tell is the post-task stage of the lesson.
Yeah,
So
and
this,
sorry, just as you can see on our books, we generally have on the left-hand side, sorry, maybe you're about to say this, okay, but on the left-hand side, we have an example of the task, how a version could look like. Obviously, this is just one type. All the tasks don't have a correct answer. You know, it's not you have to come up with something that looks exactly like that. If yours is different to that in any way, that's fantastic, as long as it's, you know, you've used the language you've been creative. Sorry, carry on, Kat.
No, yeah, exactly. Definitely good point. I was just gonna start talking about this lesson, which is a really nice lesson. And we
would you like to go to the lesson plan, or?
Can do, yeah. So the aim of the task here is to design a school, and we have been using this in our A2 class, A1, A2 class online with our Get Ready courses. So lots of the students that we have coming to our summer schools this year have been studying online with us since February.
Yeah, in fact, if you are going to be teaching with us in one of our summer centres, then you will notice that a lot of the students will be familiar with this. I'm sure there'll be students in every class that have been there, not necessarily all of them, but will know this sort of thing. And students from last year and previous years will know that as well. We also Kathy's made up lesson plans for all the lessons. So they again, these are there to support maybe less experienced teachers. So it doesn't mean you necessarily need to follow exactly this timing or whatever, but you'll be given these so that if you don't have the confidence, if you haven't taught this sort of way before, you know, it's there so you can sort of see how to structure these sort of things. Maybe you might start using a bit of your own creativity and you know, change parts of this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the lesson plans are there really to give you an idea of how to facilitate the students during that task stage, and how to ensure that they're really making the most of their own language. And then there are these ideas of how to repeat that task and do it again. And then, well, let's have a look at the lesson plan. So in that pre-task stage, where we saw the kind of the model of what the students should be doing, here the idea is that the teacher has all the students get a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil, and begins to describe the school. So they say, you know, all right, in the very middle of the school, there's the interactive science lab. There are 2 long tables in the middle of the lab. On the left of the lab, there's, and you continue, and the students are drawing. And, you know, what we found is that it can be quite funny, and they're going to have slightly different drawings, and they can talk about that as well. But there they have the model of what we want to see them do, in also that language that they need. And this is the input. The students then go on to the task stage, and they're planning. So they are generating their ideas, they're drawing their school, and then really thinking about how they're going to describe their school. And so if this is one of the younger classes, you might want to help them think about, okay, when we're describing a plan for a school, where do we begin? Do we begin with the big things, the things in the middle? And they go ahead and number on their picture the way that they would describe their school. Then we put them in pairs and they sit back to back. One of the students is drawing, and the other student is describing their dream school. Now this is the show and tell part. This is the production. And the nice thing about this here is that all the students are really, really engaged, because often when we have students present, it's quite hard to ensure that all the other students are listening at the same time. And we really don't want those students to kind of, you know, disconnect from the lesson. So if they have to draw the school, they're going to be listening to the other student. While that's happening, the teacher is going around and making any notes on language that could be improved, language that's missing. What, at this A2 level, describing schools, what type of language do you think could be missing? What might the teacher want to focus on in this language focus?
Carlos says there are.
Yeah, lots of mistakes there still at this level, definitely.
Just while people are thinking about that, I just want to answer a couple of questions. Sonia asked if there's a teacher's book. The lesson plans, to a certain degree, are a teacher's book in terms of how to do the lessons, how to do the tasks. We do have a teacher's guide as well, so a teacher's manual, which has other things that are not related to the lesson plans. Okay, but if you are teaching, you will receive the book or the books. You receive the lesson plans. You'll receive a teacher's manual as well. Okay, the difference between the USA and the UK versions, I believe, is just small things. Generally, a little bit of vocabulary and spelling. Are there more differences than that?
A couple of the lessons are different. Yeah, more kind of focused on kind of America instead of the UK.
Yeah, I think some references and stuff like that. I think, I know in the last year, I think we had something about the royal family, whereas they, we took it out and put in a different family for the Americans. Maybe the Trump family, I'm not sure. Okay, prepositions of place. A lot of people are saying, yep. Okay.
Yeah, anyway. Exactly. I'll just go back for 1 second to that. So one of the important things about doing the task before the language focus is because after they have given their presentation, they'll realize the language that they're missing, that this is their reflection. And when they see the image that the other student has drawn, they'll be like, okay, so I wasn't effective in my communication because there was this breakdown in communication. And so that's why we introduce it here, so that they really notice what they're missing. And that's why we want to give them another go at doing the task a second time, so they can use this language immediately. And this is where all these communicative competencies come in as well, because there is a lot of back and forth. There is kind of asking for clarification and stuff like that, and turn taking. That's really, really important. Then we always conclude all of our lessons with a reflection. And here the importance of this is them realizing what they're working on, how they're learning, and what they have learned. And so with these lower levels, we often give them some examples. So we might write on the whiteboard, today I learned 2, and then ask them what they've learned, to talk about my dream school, perhaps, to follow a spoken description. So, maybe they're working on their listening skills, or even really for asking for clarification from peers. But, with these lower levels, we often give them some ideas about those things, but it's really part of that kind of metacognitive awareness.
We talk about the downfalls of this approach. There are some things to watch out for when you do this, for sure.
Language coverage. So TBL prioritizes communication and task completion, which may result in insufficient coverage of specific language points or grammatical structures, especially if we're teaching in state schools. It really depends on the way that your students are assessed and what you have to kind of instruct them on.
Yeah, I think this is a sort of complementary approach. I mean, we use it exclusively in MLA, but that's because we, first of all, we're sort of building on their knowledge of English that they're getting from other sources. So whether it's our online students who are doing lessons, their normal English lessons at their normal school, and they're doing a bit of task-based learning in the afternoons and the evenings, whereas in our summer schools, they're there for an intense course of generally 1 week or 2 weeks, and therefore they're getting this sort of full immersion, so that the sort of tasks that they're doing in the lessons are not so dissimilar to actually what they're learning outside of the lessons when they're going on excursions or being forced into situations in things like shopping or even having to choose food in the canteen. These sort of things, they build on those. So it doesn't necessarily mean this is not trying to convert you to the TBL cause, because it's a complementary thing.
Task complexity. So we've touched on this a little bit already, but tasks that are too simple may not adequately challenge advanced learners, while tasks that are too complex may overwhelm those lower level learners. Yeah,
so I mean, Kathy's put a lot of thought into these, what activities we can do in the lower levels, and that's why we have the 5 different levels. And we do always move students if they're in the wrong level, because we do a test before they arrive on campus, and then they're put into classes. But at the end of our first lesson, we generally, the teachers will have to fill out something to say whether they think the student is in the correct or incorrect level, and there's movements made. So they should end up in the correct levels, and then the levels have been, very tightly controlled to make sure that they're adequate for the students' needs.
Range. So without correct facilitation from the teacher, students may not choose to build upon their existing language. And so if we don't help them notice what they're able to achieve, they may just stay at that same level. And that's why it's really, really important that we facilitate them in improving their language.
Yeah, this is something I find often, is that when I'm in the classroom with a group, if you put them in pairs and ask them to do an activity, a lot of them will be able to get by and do this activity. Ask them about what they did yesterday by not using the correct forms. They might make all their verbs regular instead of the irregular verbs or things like this. And given that they're in a pair with another language learner of the same level or similar level, that student may not correct and may even learn the mistakes. So, monitoring has to, if you are going to be a teacher with MLA, get very good at monitoring, because that's the key to picking these things up. We don't talk about just eyes in the back of your head, but also ears, from across the room.
And we talked about task complexity, but also so many of the tasks can be done across a whole different level of language proficiency. For example, like planning a holiday could be done by an A2 student, but it can also be done by a C1 student. But what we don't accept from a C1 level student is things like, I will go to Barcelona and then to the beach. And we really want them to expand on that and push themselves.
This is the good thing about task-based learning, is that it does adapt too, so that students will get more out of it at higher levels, even for any task, and then push themselves.
Student motivation and engagement. While TBL is designed to enhance student motivation and engagement, it is not guaranteed that all students will find every task equally interesting or relevant to their personal goals.
But I mean, that could be said about it.
Yeah. And that's, why we have just such a wide range of tasks that we use on each course, and why in every lesson we are doing a different course to cover a huge range of topics and ensure that it is interesting for all the students.
Yeah, I mean, even just I think it was yesterday, I was looking at the lower level book, the first level book that Kathy's produced, and just looking at all the different topics we're covering. We're covering food, shopping, clothes, weather, environment, things like that. If I remember, I'm sure there's a lot that I'm missing. That we generally have 20 different tasks, plus a couple extras in each book.
And as someone said in the chat before, lots of these downfalls can be kind of compensated for in you know, the follow-up and stuff like that. And also when we just really think of like the role of the teacher and the student. And so what is the role of the teacher in a TBL lesson? Engage. Make sure the students are interested and understand the final aim. So in that pre-task, tell them what they're going to be doing. You know, by the end of this class, you will have, you know, created your dream school. And in this way in itself, it does engage them. Be a language resource. So offer language input and model what we want them to be doing. And again, that's really about exploiting that pre-task stage of the lesson. Needs analysis, monitor and provide linguistic help where needed, address language errors and give constructive feedback for all the reasons that we have been speaking about. Reflect, encourage reflection on language production, communication strategies, and the improvements made. And in this way, we're making the students more autonomous. They're going to be much more engaged when they come to the rest of the lessons, you know, as they reflect on their own improvements throughout the course. And flexibility, so adapt to the emerging needs of the students. And again, this is very much a part of it being a student-centered approach, because we give them the task, but it's up to them really about the language that they want to use, and we are facilitating them in that.
This is something we often find too when we have teachers who sometimes are teaching these lessons multiple times, even on the same day. Sometimes you might be teaching one lesson at 9 o'clock and then another lesson at 11 o'clock, and they may be the same lesson with two different groups because we generally change. But no two tasks are no two classes are the same, and therefore the production and the needs and are all different. So it does really make it interesting to do this again with another group and see the results from another group. You know, they'll come up with a different classroom. They'll come up with a different dinner, you know, with historical figures and things like that. So it's it keeps it interesting for the students who are doing it the first time, but even for the teachers who might be doing it the third or the fourth time in the summer.
Mm. And so roles of the student, which are of course equally important: to explore, to encounter language features, vocabulary and structures while completing tasks, and communicate meaning effectively. And so they really have to, you know, be looking for that extra language that they're not quite using yet, and exploring it and trying it. Apply. Be aware of the mimicry of the world outside of the classroom. And so why are we doing this in the classroom, and how can they apply that when they go on their excursions, when they're on holiday, when they're speaking with their other students who don't have the same native language. Self-directed. They will only receive what they put in and must strive to improve. And so again, this is about them noticing what they can do and understanding what they want to do.
Yeah, and I think it's in my experience, the students at MLA centres particularly are engaged by the task-based learning method, and therefore they are a bit more receptive and you know, self-motivated than ones you might find in public schools, things like this. You know, it doesn't mean you don't get demotivated students and tired students, but you know, as long as the atmosphere is kept, you know, it's kept fast-paced, and they're given a lot to do, then I generally think they step up.
Yeah, definitely. And reflect. So, you know, develop these metacognitive awareness by reflecting on how they did, analyzing the effectiveness of their attempts, and seeking opportunities to improve their linguistic choices.
Okay, we're going to be finishing soon, so we're going a little bit over time, but we'll be finishing soon. So if you need to go, don't worry. There will be a recording of this.
So these are just a couple of ideas of, like, you know, if you are interested in creating your own tasks in your classroom, these are some of the things to be thinking about. So identify the needs. What communication skills do your students need to develop? Intrinsic motivation. So how do your students want to be using English outside of the classroom? That's how we engage them. What is the outcome? So what do you expect them to produce by the end of the lesson? Consider what the target language is. I always kind of think about working backwards. Think about that post task and the production, and then from there you can make your task and also the pre-task. Relevance. What topics are they studying and what tasks are suitable? So some ideas of how this can kind of like slip into one of your courses very easily is, you know, if you're studying modal verbs, maybe a task on giving advice to a friend. If they're working on the topic of clothes, planning a catwalk could be really interesting. And then plan the pre and the post stages. So pre-task activities can include activating prior knowledge or providing necessary language or language input. And that's why it's important to think about that post-task stage first. And the post-task activities can involve reflection, evaluation, and language focus.
Yeah, so we've got a little conclusion here.
In conclusion, task-based learning is a student-centered approach that promotes language acquisition and communicative competence through authentic and meaningful tasks. It has evolved over time in response to the limitations of traditional teaching methods, aiming to create dynamic and engaging language learning environments. TBL places students at the center of the learning process, encouraging active participation, collaboration, and the application of language skills in a real-world context, as well as ownership of their own learning.
Just before we conclude totally, I just want to thank anyone who's joined us, particularly, I mean, everyone, of course, but new people. We did send an email to people who have either applied or are contracted to us for the summer. And so those people particularly, I hope you found it useful to think about a bit of the theory and the ideas behind the methods you'll be using in the summer, and have a sort of sneak peek at the books and the sort of tasks that Kathy's been planning. Okay. Please also remember that if you know anyone, we're still recruiting for UK summer schools. So if you know any teachers or managers that would be interested in working in our summer schools, please put the word out, and you can always email anyone at MLA and they'll pass it on to us. Okay. Please remember, we will have a new series of webinars starting in September. So let us know if you have any ideas. You can always email them to me or put them in the chat now even. Okay. Thanks a lot for your attention. I'll just repeat in case you came in a little bit late. You will receive a certificate of participation sent to you if you signed up for this. If you don't, send it to me and I'll get it out to you at Formazione. And the same goes for a handout that has all this information, the tables and the lesson plan, the task, and a lot of extra activities too, that if you're curious about this, we've even got a couple of videos produced by MLA on task-based learning and a page on task-based learning there. Okay. I'm a bit sad to be telling you that this will be the last of our webinars for this academic year. I think everyone's coming to the end of the school year, so I'm sure you've got other things to do, whether it's come away with MLA, bring students away for MLA, or maybe just take a hard-earned rest. Okay, we will start again in September, so I really urge you to join us. They will be, as far as I know, they'll be on Thursdays at 6 p.m. So you can always get onto the MLA page and you can find it under Eventi or Events. Okay. Have a great summer, everyone, and I look forward to meeting the people who are coming to our centres.
Yeah, we can't wait.
Yep, and a big thanks again to Kathy who planned not only this but all the books, and has really done a great job. And I think all the teachers and all the students will be very appreciative of her work during the summer. And if not, we'll get someone else in.
Thanks again to everyone that came today, and looking forward to meeting you all in the summer.
Yep. Thanks again, everyone. Okay, and hope to see you soon. Okay, bye everyone.